Well, here with some perspective, not only on insider trading, but a lot more here, is Bethany McLean. She's a Bloomberg contributing editor, also contributing editor at Vanity Fair, and author of the recently published All the Devils Are Here, a new book about the financial crisis. Bethany, it's always great to have you on. This breaking story, we don't know a lot of detail, but there's a lot of speculation that this would center around expert networks and hedge funds and how we even define what inside information is.
Yeah, there are a lot of fascinating questions at play here, and there's a lot of pushback on the street about whether this is really insider trading or whether this is an appropriate search for information. And it's really interesting because if you think back to the reforms that were put in place in the wake of the dot-com bubble, which essentially really neutered Wall Street research firms, the growth of these expert networks has really been a response to that. And so it's really interesting to trace the path of this as well.
That's a really interesting point. I hear you struggling there. I know you've got the bug that I had a few weeks ago, so I appreciate your efforts there. Scarlet, I know you want to jump in.
Yeah, Bethany, I want to check in with you because you speak with a lot of investors, hedge fund managers, mutual fund managers. How much is this ongoing probe? Because it's not just today's developments, but it's been something that's been in the works for a year. So it's a long-term probe. How much has it been casting a pall over the hedge fund world and the participants there? Are they talking to you about kind of being worried that something will break open anytime soon?
I think definitely, but one of the interesting things that people have mentioned to me is that this isn't just hedge funds and expert networks. It's always tempting to see hedge funds as kind of the bad guys or the people who are somehow operating on the edges. But remember, a bunch of mutual fund firms have been subpoenaed in this too. And I think it'll be really interesting to watch what happens on that front. This isn't limited to the hedge fund industry.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that sort of confused and maybe worried some people is that we just knew it was massive, but we didn't know quite where the investigation was going. I mean, when you hear of something this widespread, and you rightly pointed out what happened after the dot-com boom, I mean, is this momentum, what momentum do you see this going in? I mean, it makes people worried about how the industry regulation may change.
I think that's definitely true. It's really, really difficult to define insider trading, and criminal lawyers struggle with this because the statutes are fairly vague. And one of the interesting comments to me that hedge fund people have made is that there's absolutely no way to police the most rampant kind of insider trading, which are the trades that don't happen because of the insider information people have. And in a sense, you applaud the government's efforts to make the market more fair, but I think on some level the notion that it's ever going to be totally fair is also a false one.
Bethany, we are seeing some headlines here, more specifics. The executives who are being charged are indeed from an expert networking firm. We don't have the number there, but an executive of the 5 have been arrested. We're hearing one is from an expert networking firm. James Fleischman is the name that we're seeing being charged there with wire fraud and conspiracy. Scarlett, I know you're pulling up these headlines too, try to get more information on just
what I find interesting here is that the names of the people being released in all the insider trading charges we've heard so far, James Fleischman, Raj Rajaratnam, and also Don Chu from last month, these are not people who are the high-profile guys in the world of finance. And Bethany, maybe you can bring your insight into this as well. Are we worried here that the Stephen Cohens of the world will start getting their names sullied as well here? I mean, in that they will be arrested.
Right. Well, Raj is a high-profile guy, and there was always a lot of talk and whisper about Gallion. But certainly on the inside, on the network so far, the expert networks, the speculation always swirled around Gerson Lehrman. You haven't heard anything out of that yet, and there's a sense, at least, that the government is gunning for Steve Cohen, and we're a long way from seeing if that's real or not too. And it could end with a lot of junior people getting charged.
Hey, Bethany, it's Dominic here. Really quickly, you mentioned before this idea of mutual funds now being involved here. How much does that play in? Remember, the government is trying to establish some kind of a capital markets kind of integrity here. How much does the fact that the mutual fund business is now perhaps implicated in this, how does that play out with this whole situation? Because it really does cast a huge shadow on the retail investing environment at a time when capital markets integrity is really being called into question now.
I think it's just important to remember that this isn't, there's always a temptation to paint hedge funds as somehow the source of all evil, whether people want to finger them for the financial crisis, even though they had really nothing to do with it, or say in this case, look at those hedge funds, they're up to no good. And I think it's really important to keep in mind and to know that this is a much broader investigation. It's about the entire trading environment, and that if hedge fund managers profited unfairly, perhaps average investors who are investors in a mutual fund did as well.
You see these other names here?
Okay.
Bethany, it's Margaret. We're watching these headlines start to cross fast and furiously. What we now know, the FBI has arrested 3 company insiders, 1 executive. We do know 5 executives, or 5 arrests have been made. Some of the names we're seeing: Mark Longoria, Walter Shanoon, Manoush Karanthaka. I'm struggling with that name. We're trying to as we see these figure out who and where they are from here.
James Fleischman, I'm just looking at his LinkedIn profile. He's an institutional equity sales executive at Primary Global Research. Apparently, he's based in San Francisco,
Another
in the Bay Area.
Which is what our Chris Valerio had been saying earlier on the air as well, that this was widespread. This was out in California as well. Bethany, any of those names sound familiar to you, or are these, as we had been expecting, some of the lower level research executives?
They don't sound familiar to me, but I'm also not looking at anything on a piece of paper, and my brain is most certainly foggy right now, so something may not be clicking. But it doesn't seem like any incredibly high profile target thus far.
No, it's
a former Dell Global Supply Manager had previously pleaded guilty, so that's another headline that has just come out on this as well. And we should note too that with all these headlines crossing the wire, stocks have actually continued to extend their gains. They have just come off their highs, but we're looking at gains of at least 0.3%. So the market is not focusing too much on this, and that may be
a sign of relief.
Could be, although we are seeing European stocks rally into their close as well. So that might be the bigger determinant.
Yeah, Bethany, would it be fair to say that, if we see these charges remain at just the research level, at the expert networks, that there is some sort of relief being felt in the hedge fund community because of the descriptions of this being such a massive probe?
I think so, although I think that every hedge fund is also looking at its own policies and procedures, because this line is so ill-defined between what's a legitimate gathering of information and what the government is going to say is not legitimate. And every major fund has got to be looking at their internal procedures, no matter what. Okay. So I think this will result in some changes in the industry, even if it doesn't go beyond the junior level.
All right, Bethany, you've struggled through with your voice, and we had you on to talk about the GSEs, and some of the conversation I had with Dan Mudd, so I appreciate you rolling with us on this breaking news today.
Sure.
I want to get you back on about all the devils are here. Thank you so much.